Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to address some of the lingering questions and comments that just came up at our most recent class meeting. And so we're calling this week an open studio, as if we are working in a design studio this week. So here's this week's agenda. We're going to talk about how to print your drawing in black and white, even though you're using color to visually distinguish between layers in your AutoCAD project. We'll talk about what line weights and what layers might be appropriate for your project. And we'll talk about how to apply the dimensioning standards that we discussed a couple of weeks ago to your final project. Let's get started with that black and white issue. Here we are in AutoCAD, and what I'm showing on the screen is an example project that one of the students has loaned to me very graciously to share with you in this week's lesson. And we're in the layout view on a floor plan layout. And you can see that this student has used layers and has used different colors to visually distinguish between the layers. For example, we've got a cyan here for the walls and a yellow for the furniture. Of course, we don't want to print in cyan and yellow. It doesn't work very well out in the construction fields and is actually fairly hard to read anything in yellow. So what do? It turns out it's in the Page Setup Manager. So come down here to the Layout tab and right-click and access the Page Setup Manager. And for the floor plan layout, we're going to modify. And so now we're in the Page Setup Manager for that specific layout. And check over here in this plot style table, pen assignments. You currently should have it set at none. All right. So your textbook shows you a way to set your line weights through the layers directly and line weights in the layer property managers. But there's another older way to set your line weights, and this is very common in firms, and so you might run across this, and it is with a pen assignment. And so if you click on this little down arrow, you'll see that there's various pen settings, but the one we want right now is this one called monochrome. Monochrome setting is one of the default AutoCAD settings, and it will simply take all of your lines, all of your layers. It will keep whatever line weight setting you've got in the line weight, in the layers, and it will simply turn all your lines black. Very easy. We'll pick the monochrome. Okay. There's a grayscale one, by the way, but it will turn your lighter colors like yellow a gray instead of a black, so monochrome is better. I will preview that, so we'll see what we get in our PDF, and you can see that it turns everything black. All right, so this simple setting is what you want for printing your drawing in black and white, even though you're using colors with your layers. The next question that came up about our final project is how to apply line weights. Well, refer back to a couple of weeks ago, and you should be familiar with this slide. Line weight is a communication tool, and its goal is ease of readability of your drawing. If you go ahead and use the same set of line weights that your textbook provides for the hotel project, that is fine. All right, that's a base level that you can go ahead and start with. And remembering that we, in this discussion a couple of weeks ago, assigned those different line weights to a range of, down here, profile, heavy, medium, light, and hatch. right? And so we had a discussion about which layers and which items belonged in which range. In my opinion, the textbook's layer and line weight setup isn't very nuanced. It's very minimal. And so if you want to go ahead and go beyond that, you're welcome to. Refer to the article that I have you read. I'm going to flip over there now. Okay, does this look familiar? This is an article I asked you to read about line weight. And as you scroll through, you can find the profile, heavy, medium, hatch uh, distinctions that we were just discussing. And if you go all the way to the bottom, keep scrolling all the way. Um, he the article does list this author's specific AutoCAD settings for those different levels. And so you're welcome to build your project using these levels right here. I wanted to show you an example of what that's going to look like by the time you put all these different levels of line weights in your drawings. So here is an example. It's a floor plan. And you can see that the heaviest lines on this floor plan are indeed the wall cuts, because we're cutting through those walls. All right. They have chosen to use a medium line weight for the doors. That's my usual choice. I don't like to make the doors as heavy as the walls, even though technically we are cutting through this door panel. And then if you see, we've got a plumbing fixture here. It's in actually a medium to heavy profile. All right. And they're using a light line weight for the built-in cabinetry and the furniture. One more piece of information about line types and line width is the National CAD standard. Yes, there is one. And here are some of their guidelines for the various widths. Now they are calling them fine, thin, medium, and wide right here instead of the heavy, light, etc. But they're about the same differentiation that we just used. And here are the specific settings that they are recommending in this national standard. So I will place this document in your Canvas module this week for you. The next question I want to address this week is which layers should you use for your project for this class? And the answer is very similar to the line weights. You may use the exact same layer setup that you just created for your hotel tutorial, and that's fine, and that's kind of a baseline. All right, but again, I don't feel that this is a very nuanced level of layers for a full floor plan. And so if you are wanting to take it to the next level, here are some suggestions from me. First, separate your what they call structure into walls, doors, and windows. This is something I always do. Again, I don't believe that the wall cut line should be at the same thickness as your door or your window jamb. Next, I often need to use separate layers for the appliances and for the cabinets. I do usually keep all of the cabinets and the countertops on the same layer, but I know people who like to differentiate between those two. Also, if you have stairs in your project, a layer for stairs, a layer for railings might be useful. And this may not apply to this particular project, but in general, if you are including some ceiling work or anything overhead, maybe you're using some dashed lines, that typically would go on its own layer. I often make a layer I will call sheet or maybe even layout. I've seen people do that. And that would include your title block and border and for example, any drawing labels, etc., that are all on the sheet and not the drawing. So it's kind of my paper space layer. It's useful for me at least. And finally, this is one that I routinely do, and I make a layer called no plot. All right, and this is a layer that I specifically um, don't want anything on this layer to print out on my drawing, and so it's one that I will freeze before plotting. Now, when you're working within a firm, they will most likely have a standard layer setup and line types and line weights also that you will use. If you're working in a large firm or for larger projects, you might be following the National CAD standard, which aligns also, by the way, with the AIA standards. And so the document you see on the screen is a description of some of the layer naming and organizational standards. And so it starts with, here's an example right here. It starts with a designation of the discipline, for example, A for architecture. And then there is a major group or grouping, and in this case, it's a wall. Then there could be a minor grouping, what type of wall. It could be a second minor group, so this is a full wall instead of a partial wall, for example. Um, Dimensions. And finally, the status, this tag at the end, is important when you're working with projects which often have an existing condition and then a demo with items which are being removed, and then a proposed or new condition. And so you'll often have a full set of layers in each of these conditions. I'll go ahead and post this document in your module also for your personal use.